So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a critter that we can control using the arrow keys. So let's take a look at Greenfoot for a second, and my list of actors is growing. Um, and so if I look at here's the API, and this is what we're shooting for, all right? So this is a new critter. It looks like a regular critter, but it's a controlled critter is the name that I came up with. Uh, when I run this, he is going to move upwards. He's going to move forward, but now I can control him by the arrow keys. He doesn't stop. We'll get to that down the road a little bit. Let's take a look at the Greenfoot class. So here's the API for everything. This is actor. So I'm going to go to Greenfoot. And you used a method here to get a random number, which is a very nice thing that Greenfoot has done to be able to generate a random number, a random integer for us with a seed. So that's going to be from 0 to that number. All of the methods in this in the Greenfoot class they're known as static, meaning that we do not actually make a new Greenfoot object in order to run these particular uh, these methods in here. And come on, man. Sorry, I just needed to cough. So looking at the so in other words, to get a random number, that is not specific to a given object. In the actor class, the getX, the getYs, all of those values they're specific to every single object that is calling that given method. And here, this is not. All of these methods are kind of generic. And so we can call them by the class name, not by the object name. So the identifier for all of these methods in here, we know that by the keyword static, is testing, has the mouse been moved? That's not a function of which dot you're talking about. It's just sort of a generic-y sense. There are a whole bunch of different methods that we can do. This delay, this is how to delay the whole thing. If you want to pause the game for a moment and then start it up, delay would be what you would do. Milliseconds go in there. We're going to use the get key in a moment. There's the get random number. This is the one that we're going to be focused on today is key down. And that takes a string. We have to identify which key are we talking about. So we're going to test which key has been pressed. What's the return type? The return type is a Boolean. It's a true or false. So has that key been pressed? If it has, then it comes back true. If it has not, it comes back false. This get key, which we're going to use next time, this returns a string. This returns what was the last key that was pressed. So that returns a string, some text that would identify the last key was the Q key or the 5 or whatever the key was. And we can also play sounds. We can do a little bit with the mouse. There's a mouse object where we can be even more specific about some of those things. But you can kind of look in here and say, oh, there's some kind of interesting things that you can do. The ask. So if you want to get the user's name, if you want to prompt them, the user to put in some information. Maybe it's a guessing game and they're supposed to type in a response. You could ask them, and that's going to also return a string. So there's a whole bunch of different methods. And again, the important thing to note here is that everything in the Greenfoot class is generic, all right? And we don't call it with this identifier or C dot that's specific to a given object, all right? So, all right, so let's get started. So we're going to make a new object, a new subclass. So I'm going to go to my actor, choose a new subclass. I already have one called controlled critter. So let me just beat this dead horse a little bit. So controlled critter. And again, I like the top-down model so that when when it rotates, it will actually do what I wanted to do. So maybe what's a good one? We'll go with the butterfly here. So here's a controlled critter 2. So what I want to do is pause for a second. Okay. So I just got rid of the working one. So here's my controlled critter 2. It doesn't do very much. There's one other thing that we could do. We could do this. We could just say, well, when you move, I want you to move a certain amount. This stop move, and set it to, I don't know, 5. All right, so it's going to move 5 bits every time it 5 cells every time that it acts. I don't want to paste. I want to compile that. And if I add a new controlled critter, it's just going to move 5. All right. What I could do as well, though, however, is I could set this to a variable. So we could set it now. It's always going to be locked in at 5. So if we wanted to have some leeway, so sometimes I want it to move slowly, sometimes I want it to move more quickly, I wouldn't want to set it to a specific number. So I'm going to require you to write code that creates a private int speed variable. And I'd like you to make a constructor for the controlled critter and you're going to set the private variable to some number, 5, 8, 3, something like that. So we declare it when you create the private variable. Take a look back at the step counters on how to create that. And then in the constructor, take a look at that your previous code to see how to do that. So you're going to create a private variable called speed. And then you're going to initialize that inside the constructor. All right, so, and that will give us the opportunity to change that speed. So if something happens, maybe every time if he bounces off the wall, maybe he slows down, maybe he speeds up, we can change that variable, and the rate of motion on that guy is going to change depending on that variable. All right. So the other thing we want to do is we're going to create a new method here, and that method is one that's going to be called change direction. So in Act, what's happening in this world is when we click the run button, we're going to call Act repeatedly. There's a while loop behind the scenes that says wait a certain number of milliseconds, depending on what the slider is, depending on what the speed slider is, and keep calling act again and again and again, really fast, or it's going to wait a bit. So everything is done through act. If we want to do other kinds of things, it's tempting to shove everything into act, and you'll see in some of the examples in the gallery, you'll see people that have done just that. That's a poor choice of approach. Generally speaking, you want your methods to be very short and very specific. They're going to do one thing, and when they're done with that, then we're going to move on. So the listening for a key pressed is going to be done in our new, so this will be a public, be private, I guess, void change direction. All right, and so I'm going to declare that method here. Inside of this, before I act, I'm going to, hey, do I need to change direction? So I'm going to call this dot change direction. Admittedly, I'm not doing a darn thing in this method. So what happens now when the world is running and it's looping through and we're calling act of all the actors, what's happening? It's going to first call when when the controlled critter gets created and is in the world. We're going to first call this method. It's going to run everything between this open curly brace and this close. And then we're done. And now it's going to call the move. So now what I want to do is, so we're listening to see what that direction is. And now this is just a series of if statements. So I want to see, so maybe I'll start them pointing up. So if the down arrow is pressed, I want him to turn down. The right is going, is at position 0. Down is, I believe that is, I don't know what it is. It is, down is 90. So I'm going to write this in. So it's an if statement. I'll put this in question marks. That's not going to compile. And if the down arrow is pressed, what do I want it to do? I want the critter to turn. And in the actor class, so that's the Greenfoot class. Inside actor, there's turn and there's set direction. Well, so turn is like rotate 90, and that's what we did on the box critter. So just keep turning and turning and turning and turning and turning. In this case, so that is one option. I can definitely turn, but I can also set. So the turn is gonna add a certain number of degrees to its current direction. If I set it to a negative amount, it would subtract a certain number of degrees. I can also set its rotation, and that's what I want to call here. So I don't want to call the turn method. I want to call the set direction method. Because if I hit the up arrow key, I want that sucker going up. I don't care what direction he was going in before. I don't want to have to hit it several times to get him to rotate up. I want him just to bang, be pointing up and be done with it. So it's this method here. And again, this is in the actor method, or actor class rather. So now if that is the case, so if the up arrow is pressed, right? What I want to happen, I want him this dot set rotation, and I want him to go up, which I just said, or sorry, this is, I think I said down, so we'll be consistent. That is 270. Nope, that is 90. Right. So again, I haven't quite got that condition right. That's not going to compile. Doesn't like that. So I want to test, is the down arrow pressed? And if it is, I'm going to set the rotation to 90, meaning that this guy is going to rotate and be pointing down. That's not turned, that's set that direction. All right. So what about this? This is going back to our to that Greenfoot class, and this is the is key pressed method that or is key down is the name of the method that I want to look at. All right, so it just is constantly listening. So it'd be Greenfoot dot is key down, and it needs to know what key should I be listening for. So I'm going to be doing down to start with. All right, so this is Greenfoot. Oops, I'll select all them guys. Greenfoot dot is key down. And then some of these guys, like again, here's a method, no parameters. there is a parameter on move. I have to move that number of cells. The is key down, it's wanting to know, I have to look for a specific key. This is a string, it is down. All right, so is the down arrow pressed? Again, I like doing this, especially at the beginning, if this is true. That's a little redundant, I will concede that point. If that is true, then it is going to change that rotation so it's going to be pointing down. All right. So I'm going to get a new controlled critter, add him to my world. He's moving, and if I hit the down key, all of a sudden he is going to move down. Now I'm not doing anything else, but when act was called, there was no the key was not pressed, so he just moved 5 and it was moving to the right. Eventually, I did hit that arrow key, and this change direction method got called. It left act for a moment and said, "Hey, is the down arrow key pressed?" And the answer was, "Yeah, it was." So it then goes into inside these curly braces. It runs the set rotation, sets it from 0 to 90. Now it's moving down, and it's done with the change direction. It comes back and it continues to move 5. Then we're done with that act. It keeps looping through that. Change direction wasn't called again, or if it was, there's nothing else other than down. So it was only going to be moving in five cells in the down direction. So we could just copy this and say, all right, well, I'm going to do this and look at up. And that would definitely work. All right, I could change that to up, quote, and if down is 90, up is 270. That definitely works, but this is slightly inefficient. Not terribly, but slightly. So now he moves down, but I can now move him back and forth between those two directions, and I can move him pretty quick, so that it's listening quite well. Some other programs don't necessarily do that. So I said it's slightly inefficient. It's doing this test. So if the down key is pressed, it is also going to be doing this. Well, if the down arrow key is pressed, unless I have my fingers on both of them, which is going to cause other kinds of problems. It doesn't necessarily need to do this. So I don't always need to be doing a whole separate test. I only want to do that if this first condition is not true. So if the first condition is true, then great. Then set the rotation to 90. He's moving down, and we're done. It will not do this second test. So it's the only way for it to go here and to say, is the up arrow key pressed, is if the down arrow key is not pressed. All right. So just to prove my point, here's a new critter, run, and it's the exact same as before. So there's not a whole lot of difference, but this is seen to be slightly more efficient, a bit more effective, because it is only going to be doing one of these conditions, and once it meets that condition, it skips all the others. So I can also continue this. Well, I'm going to let you figure that out. So you want to continue this so that the right arrow key is going to go to 0, the left arrow key is going to go 180, and you should be able to have a guy that moves. So your job now is to create that private speed variable, set it to, so we're going to be moving that amount. You're going to create a constructor in which you give that initial value to 5 or 8 or 2 or whatever value you like. And then you're also going to be having this change direction method that is going to be called inside act. All right. You can hopefully begin to see kind of where we're headed on this. So you got one guy that you can control and move around. You have other guys that are popping in and out of your world. And so we'll be creating a game where you're looking to eat certain things, maybe get away from other guys, and make a bit of a game. All right. So that's it. Hope that makes some sense. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay. See ya.